When did my midlife start? I took some time to think about this. I wrote it out. I think my midlife began when I quit my writing. In 2003, I moved into the city from the suburbs and proclaimed myself a writer, a novelist. I was going to follow the footsteps of Allen Ginsberg, Jack Kerouac, Stephen King, Neil Gaiman, all of my heroes, right? Dostoevsky. I was going to live my dream. I was going to live this life, be this life. And what I had left was, or who I just really wasn't anyway, and was not part of, was the normie life, right? I didn't find a partner. I didn't fall in love, get married, have kids, have a family, have the house, have the mortgage, and all that stuff. The rest of my family did. My friends did. And most of the people I work with at the restaurant I worked at did. All that. And so I sought other writers. I sought other artists. I lived the life. And I really, truly took to heart the Faulkner quote, where he basically says, sacrifice it all for your art. It all goes by the wayside for your art. And I did that. And for 15 years, I built a practice, a solitude practice of writing, editing, submitting short stories, poetry, eventually sample chapters to agents. And after 15 years, after being in the middle of I finished one novel and I was in the middle of my second one, and I had enough. I felt like it was a marriage that it was about to end. Me and the muse, we had been through the classes, been through the marriage therapy, the fights, the arguments, the working together. We just couldn't make it work. And so we had to separate. And I told everyone I knew. And I took all the stuff off my computer and put it on a flash drive and threw it in a drawer. I took all of my writing books, my craft books, everything that reminded me of writing, and I put it into a garbage bag and threw it in the corner of my closet. I was done. I was finished. And I say that's when my midlife transition started, because that was the moment where I realized that I had failed. As a sensitive striver, I had been so connected to striving for one thing. I was about perfection. I was about workaholism. I was about being the best I could possibly be. And I read every book I could. And I wrote, by 2018, I think I figured together, I wrote about 3 million words. I had wrote and wrote and wrote. And I got to a point somewhere after I let the dust settle on my writing life, where I realized that I was actually a double failure, because I could not be this thing that I told everyone I was going to do, right? Live off my writing, have a fan base, publish, and do all I could, right? To be a writer. I failed in that sense. But also I was working against the normie life, the first half life, the expectations, the classical expectations that come with being a man, right? Being a father, being a provider, being a husband, having a steady job. I failed in that too. So I remember sitting in this room, in that chair, and feeling the shame, feeling the guilt. And after writing about it, I realized what I really, really felt intensely was embarrassment. I felt embarrassed that I even talked about becoming a writer because I had failed. That's when that began. And what I had, now looking back, what I realized was I was finally letting die that first half script, that first half identity. Because even with my writing life, even as an artist, I was still living to the expectations of the machinery out there. The machinery that tells us you have to be productive, you have to be inspiring, you have to sell your books, you have to be profound, a voice of the generation. So even as an artist, I was still playing the games that my friends and family were doing. It was just shifted and twisted in a different way. And so looking back, I realized that I was embarrassed. Here's Dave, who's talking all these years about becoming a writer, and now he's not a writer. He's a fraud, he's a phony, he's a fake, he's a failure, all the F's. And that hurt. That wasn't just a hurt, that was a wound. That was a wound. And I couldn't look at another piece of fiction for years. I couldn't be around other writers. I couldn't talk about it because that was more than just a part of myself or an identity. I hear a lot of these, like, even I use this sometimes, these phrases like your first half script, right? The death of an identity. You're creating a new identity. And these are great words and phrases, but to be quite honest, it's very hard to get through and work through because you're dealing with the death of who you thought you were, who you wanted to be, and it made sense. It made sense. It wasn't the game they were playing, maybe, but it was the game you were playing. It wasn't the life that you were living, according to them. It was the life you were living. And because I put so much faith and hope and love in everything, and because I sacrificed everything I could to do this thing, to be this person, and to see that it wasn't the answer, it broke me. It broke me into a very negative space. It broke me into, I didn't feel like I broke my heart. I feel like it was pulverized, that it was just this smoking pile of dust, and then a wind just blew it all away. There I go. Try to pick up those pieces. Try to pick up the pieces of dust that I was. And so that was the beginning. I think it was 2022 when I finally said, that's enough. I can't do this anymore. And I think that's a very telling phrase. That's a good litmus test that's a good litmus test for the beginning of a transition. That phrase, I can't do this anymore. And I look back at how hurt I was, how afraid I was, how angry I was, how frustrated I was. And this all came out afterwards. All these emotions came out through therapy and working on myself in a healthy, meaningful, open, compassionate way, instead of just like, I need to fix this, because that all came later. I'll talk more about that another time. But the beginning of my midlife transition was when I finally gave up on trying to be this thing, this published author, and all the love that came with that, right? If I could only publish, because deep down inside, I wasn't thinking this, but now that I look back, what I wanted was acceptance. What I wanted was love and understanding. I wanted reputation so I can show my parents. I wanted love and I wanted success in this so I can show my friends. I didn't leave you for a bad reason. I didn't, in life itself, right? I I thought I was living my authentic life, but I wasn't. I was living by a code, by a script that said that as long as I do this thing, I'll be happy, instead of accepting myself. That was when it began for me. And it's been a trip. Do the math. 3 years feels like 10. And don't get me wrong, there was amazing times in there as well. And I'll talk more about that as well. But if you want to know how I knew the beginning of my midlife transition, that was it. And I am full of such self, I don't want to say self-love. Self-love sounds narcissistic and selfish, or maybe machinery just programs that into us. But I love all of myself now. I love all of myself. And I'm growing more accustomed to loving myself. And I feel more at peace, and I feel more human. I'm walking the pathless path. And if you are feeling these things, if you are feeling embarrassment, humiliation, if you feel like a failure, if you feel like a loser, that's that inner critic that resonates with that conditioning that you went through. James Hollis in his books talks about the midlife passage, and how one of the things that we have to come to terms with is this promise that we made to either God or the world or the universe or whoever. And that promise is, as long as I'm good, as long as I work really hard, and as long as I don't hurt anybody, as long as I'm good, as long as I work really hard, my dreams will come true. And that's not the case. And my dream didn't come true, but in that really small sense, right? In that keyhole sense, I failed that dream. I failed those super high expectations. But what broke open was the world. What broke open was paradox. What broke open was complexity and life and all of its wholeness. Every part of me I accept now, because that's how life is. So if you're feeling that way, if you're feeling humiliated, broken, ashamed, a failure, know that that's a lie. Know that that is just an old script, and those are connected to wounds, to maybe traumas, or simply the feeling that you're grieving this past self. Because life is bigger than that. Life is bigger than you. It's not true. You're not a failure. But be curious about that shame. Be curious about that humiliation. Let those feelings speak. Listen, don't judge, be compassionate, and know that it's going to be okay, and that it's okay to not be okay. That you'll get through this, that you're stronger than you think. It may just be the beginning for you. It may be the middle, it may be the end. But if you ever feel that way, know that that's a lie. That's a lie you'll work out on your own. That it won't always feel like this. I think that's probably the only thing I can promise you. I don't want to give promises. But know that it won't always be like this. And the best thing you can do is sit with it for however long, sometimes just a couple seconds. But you'll realize that the gods and goddesses within you will take that pulverized heart and miraculously make it whole again. I'm living proof, and I hope that this little story has helped you. Be well. Take care. I'll see you later.